I got to know, I could read their resumes, and they're very, very impressive, by the way. Both of them have been in the ministry for a long time, but personally, I've had a personal experience with both of them. I enrolled in the IMP class, accidentally, not by accident, but accidentally. James Buchanan said, "Oh, you got to do this class," and I did the class. And it was an amazing class, and now I know there are several people who are enrolled in the class. And one of the requirements of the class was to do the quantum living process myself. And Gary gave me a one-on-one. I was the only student I had. I got the best of Gary Simmons in that class. Then I did the teacher training, the facilitator training of the quantum living, and Jane was my coach. I can personally say my experience with both of them has been so enlightening. They're very special, especially Jane is so loving and caring. Whenever I talk to her, she gives me the time to understand what I'm facing and offers a tremendous solution. With Gary, it's different. Gary has a certain way of coaching you, and I love it because I'm pretty much an introvert just like Gary, and I love the fact that he can relate to me and I can relate. So I have a request of all of you. We are in Texas, right? Right? So how do we welcome people from other states when they come to Texas? Would you please give a Texas side welcome to both Gary and Jane Simmons? Are you hooked up?
Yes, I'm hooked up there, and you can hear me now. Well, what a delight to be with you all. It's been a joy. We've been here all day yesterday, and dinner Friday night with many of you, and now today it's the icing on the cake. It's just been a joyful time, and Joyful's right here in the front row with us even. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for inviting us to be here. And Gary will be leading the meditation after my talk, so he'll be up here as well. But let me begin by asking, is everybody awake? Everybody wide awake? Anybody kind of dozing off? You need to nudge your neighbor a little bit maybe? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to explore what it means to be spiritually awake, and sad to say, the truth seems to be that you can't sleep through that awakening. And yes, that is the title of my book. As the Armenian spiritual teacher tells us, Gurdjieff, you can't unconsciously become conscious. You can't do that. So what do we need to become conscious of? Well, Julia Cameron, author of The Artist's Way, among other books, tells us this. We are spiritual beings with having spiritual business to transact on this physical plane. I love that. Spiritual beings with spiritual business to transact. And when we forget that, when we fall asleep to who we really are, we end up sleepwalking through life. We miss it. It's like always skimming the surface, never really plumbing the depths. As the poet Diane Ackerman writes, a shallow life creates a world flat as a shadow. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about the shadow today. So we're not here to sleep through it all by skimming. We're here to dive deep. We're here to wake up, to be who we've come here to be in all that expression, to be spiritual beings with spiritual business to transact. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a story told that is comparable to the prodigal son. And the son, in this case, is a prince who inadvertently strays outside of the palace walls as a very young child. And he gets lost, And he wanders, and he wanders, and he wanders, and years go by. He ends up living his life as a pauper on the street, eventually forgetting his earlier life as a prince. And one day the king, who was always on the lookout searching for his beloved missing son, happens upon him and recognizes him. And the king joyfully rescues the prince, reveals his royal identity to him. However, the young man no longer has any memory of being a prince. He's asleep to his true self. He has trouble imagining that life, let alone living that life. And it takes time for him to release all of the beliefs that he has acquired in his life of poverty, to grow beyond belief to the knowing that he really is of royal lineage, and to begin to live his life that way. It's a great story. Considering this story, can we see any parallels in our own spiritual journey? I mean, we learn that we are spirit expressing in a human body, don't we? Unity's second principle. First principle, there's only one presence, one power. Second principle, we're all unique expressions of the one, of the divine. But do we actually live our lives as if that were true? Because that's what we're here to do, to express our divine nature in its fullness, to be spirit in expression right here, right now, in this moment. Isn't that cool? Really. It's exciting when you think about it. You know, the New Thought luminary, Ernest Holmes, founder of religious science, tells us that we are ever expanding principle of conscious intelligence. We are the ever expanding principle of conscious intelligence. So think about that for a moment. We're talking about forever expanding, never ending, infinite, eternally increasing conscious intelligence. That's what we are. We are localized conscious intelligence. So when you look in the mirror in the morning, do you say, "Good morning, ever-expanding conscious intelligence"? Turn to the person next to you and greet them with, "Good morning, ever-expanding conscious intelligence." It's a great way to greet each other, isn't it? However, knowing spiritual principle, it's a far cry from living spiritual principle. Would you agree? Yes. So we need to put principle into practice if we want to see transformative results. Unity's fifth principle tells us that. We need to take action to live the truth that we know. From the book Zen Judaism, it's a delightful mix of Zen and Jewish wisdom blended together. It reads this: "To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to experience the complete dropping away of body and mind." Now that's the Zen part. The Jewish portion reads, "The difficult part is keeping body and mind off after you've dropped them. Many people gain back body, mind, and an additional 15 pounds. Now, it's written tongue-in-cheek, but it really points out that this process is ongoing for us. It's a moment-by-moment experience of returning to the awareness of who we are and becoming aware of the baggage, the extra 15 pounds, our conditioning that we have taken on that may be getting in the way of really living our truth. So what keeps me dozing away? Well, I'm not even aware that I'm sleeping to begin with. I mean, I seem to be awake right now. I'm conscious of my surroundings. I'm not comatose. And yet, think about what else may be going on right now that I'm unaware of. Think of radio waves traveling through this sanctuary right now. Ultraviolet light rays that can't be seen with the human eye, dog whistles that we can't hear, or sense that our four-legged friends can smell, but we cannot. There's much that happens that is undetected by our human senses. In fact, research tells us that right now, there are 400 billion bits of information available for us to be accessed. You know, I often wonder how they get this research, but that's what they're telling us. There's 400 billion bits of information available to us right now. However, our brain can only process 2,000 bits in any given second. That's a whole lot of bits we're unaware of. And we're actually hardwired to be this way because the brain is a sensory organ, and it's designed to interpret and classify and make sense of our experience on this physical plane for us. If all 400 billion bits were suddenly available to us, what would that be like? Yeah, worst acid trip ever. To paraphrase Emily Dickinson, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every person could go blind. So we need some kind of governing dynamic to help us manage the experience of living in this physical realm. And that's all well and good, but the problem for us begins when we forget that we're just experiencing a slice of life solely through the sensory world and think that's all there is. What else is happening that we're unaware of? Well, are you up for a scientific experiment this morning? Yes. Great, you don't have to put on a lab coat, you don't even have to leave your seat. So to participate, look down at the floor, look down at your foot, and while you watch it, lightly tap it on the floor. Watch it while you're doing it. Now, does the visual perception of your foot touching the floor match the sensation of your foot making contact with it? In other words, can you see and feel your foot hitting the floor at the very same moment? Okay. Well, if so, congratulations. You have just done the impossible today, and it's not even lunchtime. Why have we just done the impossible? Because the speed of light is massively faster than the synaptic conduction times needed to get that message from the foot to the brain. So you should see it happen before you feel it happen, and the lag time should be noticeable. There's even a Google-worthy name for this phenomenon. It's called delay in antedating hypothesis paradox. Look it up, you'll see. Now, there are several thought-provoking theories about why this is so, but the explanation I find most intriguing and that makes the most sense to me from the little that I do know about brain research is that both events happen at different times, but they are experienced together. In other words, the brain is editing our experience of reality all the time. But here's the thing, it's not telling us that it's doing it, see? So there's stuff happening that we're unaware of. Our mind edits our experience for us in order to interpret and make sense of our world, but it neglects to tell us that it's doing so. And it has selective editing, you see. It focuses on what is ours to focus on in order to interpret our world, rather than trying to make sense of all 400 billion bits. So here's the big question. How does it know which 2,000 bits to let in? Well, the editing that goes on depends on the internal filtering system through which I view my world. And these views arise from beliefs. Beliefs that we're holding about life. Often they are limiting beliefs that we may have taken on at a young age, maybe even pre-verbal. And these beliefs lie hidden away just below the surface of our awareness. And when I have a hidden belief, I will unconsciously scan for evidence that it's true. And guess what? I'll find it. Within my 2,000 bits, I'll find the proof I'm looking for. And if I have a limiting belief, for example, that the world is a very dark and dangerous place, that people can never be trusted, that they're always up to no good, what will my experience of life be? I will find that evidence everywhere I look. I'll find proof that shows me, here's another example of how people are untrustworthy, I just knew it. And this shows me how dangerous life always is. Now, what if I have a belief about myself, that I don't measure up, that I'm inadequate in some way? What am I going to discover then? Well, I find evidence that I am ever-expanding conscious intelligence if I'm seeing life through the belief that I am inadequate or that I never measure up. I will not. And if I took on a mistaken belief that there was something wrong with me at a young age, I'm going to repress that belief. I'm going to push it out of my awareness because it's too painful to look at directly. And instead, I might decide it's really about someone else. They're the problem. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Because guess what? We all do this. We all do this. It's part of the human condition. It's a symptom of a newly discovered disease that I just made up called humanity sleeping disorder. Sleep apnea of the soul, if you will. But to be clear, this is not about blaming others from our early life who may have played a part in us taking on these limiting beliefs. It's not about that. It's also not about beating ourselves up for having these beliefs. Metaphysics does us no good if we use it to inflict guilt and shame upon others or wallow in self-judgment and self-condemnation. Do you agree with me on that? Yes. So no, it's about learning to have compassion for all of us on this journey. For all of us. For ourselves, for family members, for those who disagree with us politically, for our teachers, our friends from our childhood, the classroom bully, everyone who's been a part of our path. We are all walking around with these unconscious, conditioned patterns of behavior, and we are forgetting the amazingness that we are right now, right here. We're suffering from humanity sleeping disorder, and we are all so courageous to walk through our lives unaware of the magnificence that we are. That takes guts. That takes courage. But the truth is, the world mirrors back to us what's really going on in our psyche. And when we have these unconscious, disowned parts of ourselves that we don't think are acceptable, it's called the dark shadow. We repress those parts so they're not in our conscious awareness, and then we project them out onto the world, attributing that to be the problem. There's something wrong with that guy. It's not me. As Carl Jung says, the world becomes a replica of our unknown face. And with all this muck getting in the way of our awareness, we lose sight of the preciousness of the divine presence that we are. Now, is there hope for us? Yes. The correct response is yes, there is. So let me give you the good news. Are you ready? You got to lean in. Our projections can help us to awaken. It's kind of the good news, bad news. But we might think of them as compassionate alarm clocks, as Byron Katie refers to them. Because whenever I make a judgment about someone else or have a triggering moment from someone else's words or behaviors, it's a pivotal wake-up moment for me if I choose to use it as one. You know, we can pray, we can meditate, we can read, we can go to workshops and retreats and classes to learn about spiritual principle. I love all that stuff. I do all that stuff. And where the rubber really meets the road, where we roll up our sleeves and get down into the depths of our spiritual work, is in the arena of human relationship. Especially a relationship with someone who can push our buttons. Do you know what I mean by this? Do you have someone who does that for you? Mm-hmm. Our button pushers are quite often very conveniently close at hand. And guess what? They're so valuable to us because they clearly show us those places in need of healing and integration, and they do it with great accuracy. It's like poking a sore spot, you know? It's like we find that, whoa, that sore spot. And why does it hurt to get our buttons pushed? Well, because it goes to one of those places we don't want to look at, a belief that we may have hidden from ourselves and then project onto someone else. Now, hear me clearly. I am not suggesting anyone stay in any kind of an abusive relationship. If you are in an abusive or an unsafe situation, you need to get some help. I hope we're all very clear on that. In addition, if you have any deep-seated unresolved trauma from your past, I recommend getting additional support to help through that. What I'm talking about are the irritations, you know, the annoyances, the socks on the floor, that kind of stuff. Those are paper-cut moments that can be surprisingly ripe with abundant opportunity for spiritual growth. And yet, that's when we would much rather hit the snooze button and nap through it all, rather than see the value of having our buttons pushed. But when we choose to use these moments as awakening moments, now the work becomes compassionately dealing with the inner button. Do you see the difference here? This is where our power lies. This is where transformation takes place, working with the inner buttons that can get pushed. Do you know, one of the ways that samurai warriors learned to do battle with each other was by hitting pressure points on the body. So they were pushing each other's buttons in a really big way. And there's a story told of one samurai who was soundly defeated through this method of combat, and after that he gave it all up to spend time in the wilderness contemplating his life. 20 years later, he once again encountered his previous opponent who challenged him to another fight. And the samurai agreed, and this time the other fighter was surprised to see that no matter how many times he hit those pressure points, there was no reaction. And the samurai explained he had spent time in contemplation working with the pressure points, changing the sore spots. They were no longer available to be triggered. And in a sense, that's the work. That's the work. And it's truly liberating work. Becoming aware of the sore spots that get triggered within us, becoming curious about that, and discovering what's behind it, making an internal shift to integration through compassion, self-compassion. Self-compassion as well as compassion for others. And here's what happens then. Those sore spots lose their ability to send us over the edge. See? It's like socks on the floor, meh. We change the belief, we change what we see. We change what we see, we change our experience of reality. Unity's third, what's the word? Principle, thank you. You know the one, change your thinking, change your reality. We have to get into the depths and change those beliefs, and we do change our experience of reality. And then those moments when our buttons get pushed actually become portals to our awakening, because we truly start to see, this is not who I am. I mean, maybe I have a limiting belief that I'm inadequate, and this is pushing that button, but that's not the truth of me. The truth is, I am a spiritual being with what? Spiritual business to transact on this physical plane. At the center of my being, I am ever expanding conscious intelligence. Now, we don't usually do this work too willingly. Nobody wants to look at their stuff, you know? We can hear ourselves thinking, this is negative energy. I don't want to mess with this. I didn't come to Unity to hear about this stuff today. I'm all about being positive, affirming the truth. Yes, we are, especially in Unity. But as we're busy affirming, it can be very easy to ignore the denial part of the equation. You see? Myrtle Fillmore, I usually just say that Myrtle Fillmore loved her body back to wholeness. And I love that. But what I had been missing is that first she went to every single cell and apologized to each one for ever believing it was anything less than whole. And until that belief changes, nothing else can, you see. So we can affirm our good all we want, but if there's something sabotaging our success and we're unaware of it, will transformation happen? I mean, here's the thing. We can pretend the shadow doesn't exist. We can ignore it. Does it go away? No. It's having an effect whether I know it or not. And if I have a goal, but I have a conflicting belief, the belief's going to win hands down every time. And I will remain imprisoned in self-imposed limitation. However, the good news is Those unconscious limiting beliefs are actually much more impactful when we're unaware of them, you see. They cause way more havoc in our life when they're simmering away under the surface than when they're brought into the light of day. And of course, this is what the art of quantum living is designed to help us do, to bring those things into the light so that we can work with them and integrate them and change our lives. So we want to make our conditioning conscious. Otherwise, as Carl Jung taught, when pain is not transformed, it will be transmitted in some way. When pain is not transformed, it's going to be transmitted in some way, either out there or in here. There's all kinds of ways. And there's a Freudian saying, pain doesn't decompose when you bury it. So whatever we got down there, it's not turning into lovely compost for us. It's continuing to be pain that will be transmitted. And often, it's transmitted by slipping out of our mouths at the most inopportune times. Anyone ever had that happen? It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater and eventually, poof, it's going to pop up somewhere out of the blue. See, we are creative beings. We're always creating, either consciously or unconsciously. Charles Fillmore says, to be ignorant of mind and its laws is to be a child playing with fire. Awakening means becoming aware of when default patterns of behavior are creating our experience, and then being empowered to make a new choice, to create something new. This work is empowering. It's enlivening. It's freedom. Freedom to be who we've come here to be, unencumbered by our thoughts and beliefs and opinions and attitudes and filters that may have accumulated over the years. Becoming aware of when we are sabotaging our own success through ingrained patterns of behavior and having the power in the moment to recognize it and change it. We are limitless divine potential. Isn't that cool? We have access to a higher dimension of creativity. From the book of John, words attributed to Jesus, is it not written in your laws, I said, ye are gods. Ye are gods. And I believe we're in a juncture in our unfolding as a culture, and the world needs us to be who we've come here to be. And we can choose to purposefully evolve our hearts, our minds. We are so much more than we know, and we do not serve the world by playing small. It's time for us. Do you feel that? It's time for us to be truly free, to awaken to who we've come here to be, to make a difference in the world, not just to sleepwalk through it all, but to realize we have the freedom, we have the power, we have the ability in the present moment to live a heart-centered, compassionate life as conscious, aware expressions of spirit. Just got to clean out the sludge. Let me leave you with words about really living life from one of my favorite poets, the late Mary Oliver, who wrote this. When it's over, I want to say all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up having simply visited this world. So I invite you to remember, you are a spiritual being with spiritual business to transact on this physical plane today, right now, to dive deep into the present moment, to feel the wonder, feel the joy of discovery that comes from living an awakened life as, say it with me, ever expanding conscious intelligence. Here's to the exploration, and so it is. Thank you.
Before I forget, Jane is going to be signing her book. We've got a limited number of copies, so if you want to buy the book, it's available at the book nook, and she'll be signing. Here's Gary.
I have my own microphone. Wasn't she great? That's awesome.
Thank you.
So you mind if I, before meditation, tell a little story about how Jane and I met? Is that okay?
Oh, no.
About 23 or 4 years ago, I was invited to come to the ministerial school. I was director of peacemaking services for, at the time, the International Association of Unity Churches, now Worldwide Unity Worldwide Ministries. And I was doing a course on conflict management as director of peacemaking services. And so I invited someone from her class to come up and be my assistant in an exercise that I was going to demonstrate. And I heard all this murmuring from the class, and they all said, Jane, you go up, you do it. And so she walks up in front, and she stands in front of me, and she does this. She bows. And then I came to find out that she's a black belt in Taekwondo. And I'm a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. So that's why she was bowing to me as a senior in that martial art. But as director of peacemaking services, it was during the time when the world was going to war with, the United States was going to go to war in Iraq. And I received a phone call from a person who identified himself as a director of ecology and peace in this little town that we lived in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And he asked me what, as director of peacemaking services for the Unity movement, what does Unity stand on going to war in Iraq? And I said, well, Unity doesn't take a stand. And so he thanked me, and then afterwards, as I hung up, I got sick to my stomach. How is it possible that we, who have one of the most transformative teachings in the world, on the planet, have nothing to say about what it means to be at peace and what it means to not go to war? And so I urged the leadership of Unity Worldwide Ministries, the association at that time, to come up with some statement of peace, something that we can say, this is what we stand for. This is why we're here in this world. And so they asked me, well, would you offer a peace statement for us? You know, when you're the one that complains, they give you the assignment to come up with. And I don't know what our position should have been. And so I just sat down at the computer, and a couple of statements came forth, and I sent them off, and a few weeks later I heard that they really liked the statements that I sent, but they decided to just pick one. Of course, the one that they really liked the most, they couldn't really repeat in public. You know, something like, don't blow up stuff and kill people. And so the statement that they adopted that I thought was very appropriate, because you're talking about peace, World Day of Prayer, is this. And I want to share it with you as a prelude to our meditation experience. Because I think it's important for all of us in Unity to know what Unity stands for and what our official position is in the world. Unity stands for peace in the presence of conflict, for love in the presence of hatred, for forgiveness in the presence of injury. Unity honors the many names for God, the many paths to God, the many ways of worshiping God, for we know that there is only one power and one presence that is God, and that God loves us all equally. It is therefore the position of Unity to urge all nations, their leaders, and their people to turn to God during these challenging times and pursue peace, not war. For this is what honors the God of all of our faith traditions. Unity stands for peace in our lifetime. That's what we stand for. And so now let us prepare our time prepare for meditation. And so I invite you, if you're comfortable, to simply relax with your feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. And just take a moment now just to settle in and become aware of the presence that you are. And one of the ways in which we can get in touch with the presence is simply to feel the breath, to feel the sensation of feet on the floor, to recognize that this is a life that is living itself in and through us right now. And so as we turn our attention inward, I invite you first to experience the feeling of your feet on the floor. Grounding is so important as a part of entering into a greater awareness of the truth of who we are and what we've come here to be. And so we allow this grounding experience, the sensation of being anchored in this world, to now draw forth from this connection the grounding experience of the power and presence of God. Now bring your awareness to your gut, sometimes called the womb. This is the energy center of creativity, of renewal, of rebirth. And feel in your gut a stirring and an intelligence and a presence that is holding you, guiding you, speaking to you. And bring your awareness to your heart space. And allow the awareness of breath and the heart to join as if you're breathing into the heart. And bring into your mind's eye someone or something that you deeply appreciate. Could be a life partner, a family member, a cherished pet, a beloved child, or even a fond memory. Just whatever carries with it the felt experience of appreciation, gratitude, love, care, compassion. And allow that feeling to arise and extend beyond your physical self. Filling this wondrous sanctuary with the energetic field of heart-centered coherence and love in the presence of God. And now let us visualize that each one of us is connected heart to heart. We might even want to imagine this connection like a neural network where each of us is a localized center, a neuron in the mind of God. And this neural architecture of spirit is like our safety net. It holds us dearly and guides us in wondrous ways. And then let us bring our attention to our crown of our head, our connection to the cosmos, to the realms that we access during dream states and mystical experiences and deep meditation. Let us find ourselves in a wondrous, magnificent fullness, an experience of wholeness and oneness and interbeing. And so let us hold ourselves in the awareness of our connection one to another, aligned with the intent to bring forth a greater good and to truly make a difference. For we're here to transform our lives and inspire people to make a positive difference in our world. And when we recognize that this is our God job, indeed it is such a good and important work. And so for this time that we've shared together in the awareness of our oneness with God, our connection and dependence on each other, we give grateful thanks. And so it is. Amen.